So this is an overview of what we'll cover in today's session. So the importance of creative and its impact on campaign performance. We'll also look at why testing creative is so valuable, how you can test different creative strategies against each other, how to assess how well your current strategy is working, factors to consider when testing creatives, and how to interpret the results of your creative tests to inform your decisions going forward. First, we're going to discuss the importance of testing and optimizing creative to improve the performance of your marketing strategy. There's no doubt that mobile is where consumer attention is now. Driving growth in this new environment means standing out in a sea of mobile content and advertising. A study carried out by Nielsen found that creative quality is in fact the most important driver of sales on digital channels, with a contribution of 56% attributed to creative quality. So even the best media plan won't save a campaign with poor creative. While the average creative productivity metric is virtually the same for both television and digital, as you can see here at 8 cents, there are wide swings in quality for digital, almost twice the standard deviation of television. What does this mean? It means that the gap between really good and really bad creatives on digital remains significant. When you have a really good creative, this leads to a lot more incremental sales. So let's take a closer look to understand why creative has such a strong influence on your Facebook campaign performance. Facebook's ad auction aims to maximize outcomes for your business, while also ensuring a quality experience for the user. To compete in the auction, each ad is assigned a total value score. If an ad's total value score is high, your ad will be shown more often and at a lower cost. In comparison, a low total value score is a major reason why your ads may underdeliver or why costs are high. The total value score is not just based on the highest advertiser bid. It also includes estimated action rate, which we can see here, and this is how likely an impression will lead to your desired result amongst the user. And there's also the user value, which is how interesting and relevant this ad is to the user. From several tests we've carried out, we saw that creative had roughly a 50% influence on the estimated action rate and a 10% influence on the user value. Hence, better creative can get you more conversions and improve delivery without you having to increase your bid. It's important to highlight that while a good creative can help you up to 50% and 10% respectively, a bad creative can also have the inverse effect on your business. Okay, so now we know that creative is very important in both digital and Facebook advertising. But why should you test your creative rather than just implementing best practices and letting our algorithm decide which is the best to deliver? Because when you test creatives, you can understand what improves performance and drives a lower cost per result. And what marketing guru wouldn't want that? From several studies, we have proven that creative testing drives business outcomes for both brand and your advertisers. Through an analysis of 162 tests, winning creative assets had a 15% lower cost per ad recall, a 13% lower cost per action intent, and a 26% lower cost per action. So while it is important to implement creative best practices, such as mobile first video or showing your main message in the first 3 seconds, the next step to this is to test what creative drives better performance and at a lower cost. But not all creative experimentation is created equal. And it's important to understand that there are several layers in sound creative testing. There is traditional pre-testing, like focus groups, interviews, or even an internal voting system in your company, or a CMO's decision that relies on qualitative-based feedback to inform creative development and investment. These approaches can give great qualitative inputs, but they're not tied to the business outcomes, such as sales, and can often be biased. On the other hand of the spectrum, some advertisers only rely on machine learning picked winners, which is a cost-effective, performance metric-based way of selecting creatives. While tied to business outcomes, this method doesn't tell us why a particular creative approach resonated or how to improve it. Then there is the merging of the two, where you use machine learning and your team's creative interpretation to understand what delivers sales, followed by your creative expertise to learn what works and build from it. Facebook's machine learning is primed to enable the creative industry to take full advantage of this style of creative experimentation that relies on both creativity and data. So it's important that when it comes to creative testing, we rely on both data and creativity rather than intuition alone. As Ron Kohavi and Stefan Tomek said, controlled experiments can transform decision-making into a scientific, evidence-driven process rather than an intuitive reaction. Without them, many breakthroughs might never happen, and many bad ideas would be implemented, only to fail, wasting resources. Testing allows organizations such as yours to iterate rapidly, fail fast, and pivot. But many of you may be asking, why would I test my creatives when I can just rely on Facebook's machine learning to decide the best creative for performance? Well, this is because machine learning is great for auto-optimization purposes, but it does not provide the same clean environment for testing. And why is this? Well, firstly, large audience overlap with your other active campaigns and creatives will cause an unequal delivery of your ads. Hence, they cannot be fairly compared. A test variable is not isolated when you're just using machine learning. So rather than testing a product-driven versus a benefits-driven creative, you may be running these different creatives on different audiences with different optimization events, so you won't know whether it was one of the creatives that drove performance or a different factor. There may also be a possible early performance bias, as our algorithm needs 50 conversions per ad set to calibrate and predict longer term delivery. So if you started delivering one creative before another, that might get an unfair advantage. Results are also attributed on a last touch basis. But measurement tools such as Facebook's A/B testing help understand the impact of creative variations on your business outcomes. There are numerous creative tests that you can explore, from messaging to influencer assets to incorporating brand elements, and many more. As we only have an hour here together today, I'd encourage you to go through the deck that we will send you and check out the appendix for a number of testing frameworks you can use to test your creative strategy. So here's an example of creative testing we did with advertisers. We knew that visual identity drives recognition, differentiation, and trust. But we were curious, does it drive conversions? To find out, we distilled visual identity into 4 key elements: logo, type, color, and mnemonic. We then tested this brand Dior approach across 9 different clients to see if adding this visual ID elements to their creatives would yield incremental impact. What we can see is that in 67% of the cases, the brand Dior creative, those that had the different key elements, had a higher lift in conversion events in comparison to the Dior creative only. And in 71% of the pilots, we saw that again, the brand Dior had higher incremental return on ad spend in comparison to the Dior creative. So how can you design your own studies to improve your creative strategy? Well, regardless of what type of test you choose, we always recommend using beta typing to experiment, learn, and improve your results. Beta typing involves 5 key steps. First is to ask. Craft the hypothesis based on outcomes and what you're trying to learn. Then make. Design the experiment and creative assets based on your hypothesis. Then learn. Analyze the results of the experiment based on your primary KPI and additional metrics that help you measure business success. And adapt. Strategically and creatively determine the next and future implementations of learning. And then finally, step 5 is to repeat and continue these 4 steps as needed until you achieve your desired results. So with that in mind, here are the 4 things you need before you start designing your test. First is a campaign objective. That is, what are you trying to achieve? Then, with your business goal in mind, identify a primary key performance indicator, or how you're going to measure your results. Next, you'll want a strong question. So when A/B testing, formulate a clear question you have and how the test will affect your KPI. Make sure you isolate the variables that you want to focus on in your test. This question will help you formulate a test hypothesis that specifies the expected relationship between an independent and a dependent variable. Make sure you're only testing for one variable per test. For A/B creative tests, examples of a defined variable are different themed creatives, for example, seasonal versus evergreen, a vertical versus a horizontal format, different copies, and again, many more that we're going to send you out in the resources. So let's go back and get started with your business objective or key question that you're trying to answer when you approach creative testing. So for example, do you want to understand how to increase sales of your product or reposition your brand? Do you want to get people to download your app and understand which best creative strategy does this? Do you want to get people to subscribe to your service? Or are you trying to reach a new untapped audience? You can select whatever question is aligned with your business objective. Then, when you've decided on your business objective, you then need to define your primary KPI that measures this and decide which stage of the funnel your KPI is at. It may be either a brand metric if you are asking yourself, how can I reposition my brand? In this case, you'll want to do a brand experiment. Or it may be a conversion metric, such as app installs, in which case you can do a conversion experiment. But it's important that you select the right KPI that matches your business goals. And if you want to measure app installs, then don't necessarily be measuring the influence of brand. Now it's important to get really specific on your question and what aspect of your creative strategy it relates to. And so you can bucket it into, are you testing the positioning, the concept, or the execution of your creatives? Then here are some examples of clear creative questions that you can approach your test with. For example, which benefit shown through my creatives is most compelling? Or which story shown through my videos delivers the greatest emotional reward? Which visual, headline, or call to action is most effective? Which aspect ratios are most effective? Which character or protagonist resonates most among my audience? Then, to test which creative strategy works best in answering this question, you can set up an A/B test with or without a holdout. I'm going to explain what these mean. An A/B test with no holdout answers which strategy is associated with the lowest cost per result, but it does not measure incrementality. An A/B test with a holdout, which we also call at Facebook a multi-cell lift test, answers which strategy caused the greatest incremental value. But what do we mean by incrementality? The goal of incrementality measurement is to measure the true value of your ads. When you are running ads on any platform, the following is always happening. There is the light yellow area, which indicates the conversions that happened from people who didn't see your advertising. So this would be your direct or organic audience. The dark orange area indicates the conversions from people who saw your ads but would have converted on their own. And those conversions here in the light orange area are the ones that happened that were directly correlated to seeing your ads. You want to ensure you're only spending your budget where ads cause people to buy and not where they would have converted otherwise on their own. So essentially, incrementality is the lift in your business outcomes, either in sales or in brand metrics, solely due to advertising. And we measure it by comparing differences in outcomes between a group of people shown your ads versus a comparable group of people that weren't shown your ads to see if showing your ads does cause sales. So let's go back again and look at the difference between the A/B tests with no holdout versus those with a holdout, so you can decide which test is best to choose. Firstly, both A/B tests with or without a holdout can be found in experiments, which is in the drop-down menu of Ads Manager. If you are doing an A/B test with no holdout, you can also do this in the Create section of Ads Manager when setting up a new campaign. And you can also do a lift test through your point of contact at Facebook. So then the difference is that the lift test has control groups while A/B tests do not. And as I said, the control group tells us what would have happened if we did not run our strategy. It shows us our baseline, that is, how many people would have already converted without seeing your ads. The ads are then delivered and conversions are measured through the pixel. If you're doing a brand study, brand metrics can be measured in a multi-cell brand lift study through polling the audience. When it comes to results, A/B tests with no holdout identify the strategy with the lowest cost per result, and lift tests identify the winner based on the cost per incremental result. That is, who would have converted purely because they saw your ads. A very important difference between the two is that an A/B test with no holdout, so this first one here, attributes results on the basis of Ads Manager attribution logic set in your account. Whereas the multi-cell lift study measures results without being restricted by an attribution model during the time period of the test. So it measures the true value of outcomes no matter whether it was a first, last, or middle touch point. So now that you know your different testing options for testing creative, let's see when you should choose one versus the other. So when should you choose an A/B test with no holdout versus a multi-cell lift test in your creative testing? So use a multi-cell lift study when you are testing a totally new creative strategy or concept to understand if it is driving true sales. Also, if your incremental value is your KPI. Additionally, if a high confidence level, such as 99%, is required to make budget decisions on creative strategies. Or if the different creative strategies being compared are likely to deliver to audiences with different baseline outcomes, such as a creative designed for moms versus another creative designed for students. You can then use an A/B test with no holdout when the different strategies being compared are likely to deliver to audiences with similar baseline outcomes. For example, all your creatives that you want to test are designed towards football fans. If you do not want to hold out during a high sales period, such as seasonal events, then do not use a lift study, but rather an A/B test. If you are happy with a confidence level of 75%, then you can go ahead and do an A/B test with no holdout. Or if you want to understand the impact of tactical changes or iterations, such as change in copy or call to action. Now, we mentioned how different audiences may have different baselines that you need to consider, such as when I said there about moms versus students. And it's important when we think about this in creative testing, so I'm going to explain it a bit further. Imagine we are a well-known athlete shoe brand, and we are testing two different creative strategies. Strategy A features why these shoes are great for running, for athletes. And strategy B shows the benefits of these shoes for gardening. So then our algorithm decides to send creative A to those interested in running and creative B to those interested in gardening. Now, if you do a split test, it will look like strategy A delivers the most results. However, this audience was already existing customers and more likely to buy from you due to your established brand with these athletes. So they were starting at a higher starting point or baseline in terms of likelihood to buy. The audience did not need to see your ads to buy. On the other hand, strategy B wins on lift, because despite starting from a lower baseline in terms of natural likelihood to buy, the ad caused a larger lift in sales amongst this gardening audience, who were not already existing customers. Here we have another example of different creative strategies that will deliver to different audiences based on relevancy and likelihood to convert. For example, couples creative A versus the creative designed for families versus a generic creative C will all appeal to different audiences. If we do a split test on these creatives, it appears as though the family creative led to more conversions. However, as these cars may already be well known amongst families due to large storage space and safety, the families were already likely to buy. If, however, we did an incrementality lift test to identify the best creative, we can see that the generic broad creative was the winner, as it caused more people to convert that would not have converted otherwise. So when will different creative strategies deliver to audiences with different baselines? This is most likely when the audiences have different interests, or are different demographics, or are likely to take a different action based on your creative ads. For example, an awareness building message in your creative is probably more likely to deliver to someone who enjoys getting to know a brand and wants to learn more about your sustainability, for example, versus a quick buyer who is more likely to respond to a buy now call to action or a style of creative. There will probably be no difference in baselines. That is, the creatives will deliver to a very similar audience if the differences in creatives are only tactical, such as format, text, and length of video. So now that you understand how to test and what type of test to use, let's look at approaches in testing multiple creatives at once, because these are often the most common questions that we get. So if you have a lot of creatives to test, or you are always generating new creatives, then we recommend phasing your creative testing. And this is because you can only test up to 5 different creatives at once. So as part of the first phase, we suggest identifying what themes you have amongst your creatives. These themes might be aimed at different audiences, they might have different protagonists, or they might be set in different locations. But try to group your creatives into themes and then test a different themed creative against each other. So for example, we have here theme A versus B versus C versus D. Once you have identified your top winning theme from this test, you can then go on to create a second test within each of your top winning themes. So for example, you don't just need to take one theme, such as theme A, but you could also look at theme B separately. So take the different ads that you would classify under theme A, for example, to understand which iteration of these drives the best results at the lowest cost. Then by iterating on winning themes and variations, you'll begin to understand what creative strategies drive the best results so you can optimize on these. Another example of multiple creative testing is to test creative formats by placements. So phase 1 would be running placement-only split tests, trying to identify the best creative for each placement. When generating the test creatives, we should use each placement's best practices for creative also. You can then run the test for one specific placement, such as feed only, or on multiple placements, as shown here. After identifying the winners for each placement, you can then proceed to phase 2 by running a test with cell 1, which has your existing business as usual creatives, and definitely please use automatic placements with these, against cell 2, which has the winning creatives from phase 1. And again, make sure you are using automatic placements and placement asset customization. And then you can see which strategy works the best for you. So this is a very common question we get. What is the optimal creative refresh cadence we should have when we are seeing creative fatigue? The answer is that there actually is no one answer. And hence what we recommend is testing it on your activity in order to see what works best for you. Here you can see an example of a lip test using 2 cells, each one with a different creative refresh cadence. The winning cell will be that one which drives the highest incremental return on ad spend, or whatever KPI is most relevant to yours. And then you can see the type of refresh cadence that works best for you. So now that we've learned the essentials and basics about creative testing, I really want to highlight some considerations and watchouts, because these are often the reasons creative test fails and your results may be inconclusive. To ensure it is a fair test where you can take action on the results, it's important to look at these factors. First is creative consistency. That is to ensure you isolate the testing factor between the cells. The next is execution. So please make sure you are using the same budget, bid, targeting, time periods for each of the cells. We also highly recommend avoiding edits. And if you have to make an edit to one cell in your test, please make the same edit to all cells so they are consistent. And finally, KPIs. Make sure you are using the same KPIs across tests and framework for a fair comparison. Again, it does not make sense to measure ad recall for one cell and app installs for another cell. So it is extremely important when testing creative that, as we said, you keep all other creative elements consistent, aside from the creative element that you are testing. If these, for example, are not the variables that you are testing, please keep them consistent. And these are often the ones that advertisers do change the most along with the creative variable they're testing. So this is format, call to action or the message, the timing of when you introduce your branding and messaging, video length, and copy. So for example, if you are testing 2 different influencer assets, you need to ensure both formats are video, for example. If you test 2 different influencer assets, one on video and one on image, you're not going to know if the difference in results was due to the influencer asset or the format. It's also important to ask yourself, is your test reliable and representative of real-world campaign performance? The first and possibly most important of creative testing, or any testing, is to avoid contamination. So please ensure that you have no other campaigns targeting the same audience that might cause them to convert, because otherwise you won't know if it was your creative that caused them to convert or this other campaign running. The next is to ensure that there is adequate budget and time of the test for us to gather enough data. When testing the best creative strategy for conversions, it is important that your ad sets will have had enough conversions over a 7-day period to have left the learning phase. We're going to discuss what the learning phase is in the next slide. Within an A/B test, we recommend a minimum of 50 conversions per cell in 7 days. And in a holdout test, we recommend a minimum of 100 conversions per cell. When measuring brand, please ensure that reach and frequency minimums are met per cell, and that there is a minimum of 3 to 4 week measurement period recommended. You can also get more information on these minimums from your point of contact at Facebook. So, we just mentioned the learning phase, and it's very important for you to understand its impact on creative testing. It is the time period when our delivery system is exploring how, when, and where to better deliver an ad. While an ad set is in the learning phase, you are more likely to see volatile performance and higher CPAs. You will see in Ads Manager that your ad sets are labeled as either learning or learning limited if they are still in the learning phase. Then when they leave the learning phase, this label will change to active. We say that an ad set is well calibrated and out of the learning phase when the true action rate is close to the estimated action rate. And this usually occurs at 50 conversions on what is being optimized for. But as I said, before 50 conversions, you are likely to see volatile performance and higher CPAs. So how do we consider the learning phase when running tests? Well, test results for ad sets that have not yet exited the learning phase are not relevant and can be misleading. In a lift test, it's okay. There will be no statistical significant winner if there have not been enough conversions per creative. However, even if you get a declared winner in a split test, that is, an A/B test with no holdout, this is due to the difference in conversions between cell A and cell B. But if you do not have at least 50 conversions per cell, these results are hard to make decisions on. So if we have set up an A/B test with no holdout comparing two different creatives, cell A might be declared the winner, and this means it saw a cheaper CPA than creative B. However, the model does not take into account that both cells are in the learning phase and that they are actually seeing volatile performance. Maybe after exiting the learning phase and stable performance is occurring, the creative in cell B would see a cheaper CPA, but we won't know because they are in volatile states. It would be like comparing Michael Jordan and LeBron James to test which basketball player could shoot the most hoops. We would ideally want to test them against each other, both as trained athletes, not as teenagers learning to play. While testing them as teenagers, there may be a clear winner at that moment in time, but this is not necessarily indicative as to who will be the better player when their training is complete. So statistical significance or test winners are not indicative of auction predictability until the ad set is well calibrated and out of the learning phase. So a very common question we get is how to test new creatives versus older ones, as the newer ones will not have had enough conversions to exit the learning phase and calibrate. Again, as I said, we do not want to test a fully trained adult Michael Jordan against a teenager LeBron James. So the first option is to pre-test the new creative or creatives. By running a pre-test on one or more new creatives for 7 days, we will give these creatives an opportunity to build up a history and allow them to perform at their best. You can then put the winning new creatives in a test against the older creatives. The second option is to run longer tests for a minimum of 7 days, and when your newer creatives are no longer flagged as learning or learning limited. By doing this, we are again giving the creatives more opportunity to build up a history and perform optimally. Third, you can pause the old creative. The most recent 7 days of learning has the strongest impact on an ad's performance. So by pausing an old ad for 7 days, we can partially clear the history of an old creative in order to test it against our new creative on more even terms. So the process of creative testing isn't a one and done exercise. It's important to implement an always-on testing model to adjust to changing customer needs and to replace underperforming assets. So this step in beta typing is quite simple. Did you prove your hypothesis based on the KPIs that you established in your test? And is there anything additional you can learn based on secondary diagnostics or metrics? So while the primary KPI indicates whether our experiment was proven or disproven and clearly points to the asset that best delivers against the desired outcome measures, there is a lot of value in exploring secondary diagnostics to reveal additional learnings. You can then look for insights and actions, such as do some assets reach a new age demographic or appeal to a different gender than the other. And so how will you be shown the winning strategy in a test? Well, again, we have an A/B test with no holdout and an A/B test with a holdout. So I'm going to show you the two. The first one here is an A/B test with no holdout. We can see that over the time of the study, Creative 2 was the winner because it had the lower cost per action. Then in the second one, we can see in this lift test that Creative 2 was the winner because it had the highest incremental purchasers in comparison to its control group. You can also look for further insights within these tools, which offer further breakdowns, or look in Delivery Insights in Ads Manager. So what action can you take based on your results and the insights? Well, here are some thumb rules to consider in different result scenarios. If the results are positive, for example, the creative that you wanted to win won, considering incorporating the winning creative or creatives into your business as usual strategy. We then suggest you pause the lowest performing creatives, especially if your ad sets have already more than 5 creatives, as we don't recommend more than 5 creatives per ad set. If the tests are not so positive or surprising, consider adjusting the strategy, such as changing the creatives to test different creatives, or looking at the impact of other upper funnel conversion events. So for example, do these creatives work better, for example, within your branding campaign? If you are getting non-reliable or non-statistically significant results, then please review your setup to ensure there was enough budget and study duration for a reasonable reach and conversion rates, and that you are leaving the learning phase. These are most often the common causes for not getting statistical significant results, is that there was not enough conversions for us to detect, and that is due to budget or the testing period was not long enough. Also, always review the creative before you run the test to ensure that your campaign is designed to make an impact. And most often than not, you don't need to worry because the test setup has the answers as to why the test is not positive. So go back, review how you set up the test. Was there any issues or watch-outs that we already discussed that might have caused these negative results? So as we said, the process of creative testing isn't a one and done exercise. It's really important to implement an always-on testing model to adjust to changing customer needs, such as now, and to replace your underperforming assets. Once you have decided what you're trying to learn, ran the experiment, analyze the results for insights, and determined how you'll implement your learnings, we then suggest you repeat these steps to always improve performance on your marketing strategies. So I want to leave you with some other factors to explore once you have tested and discovered your winning creatives. You can then use these winning creatives to see how they perform under other factors that will affect the success of your marketing strategy. So what you might want to do is take your the creatives that you've already tested and that have won and test these on different audiences, on different formats, such as adding motion or putting it in a carousel. You might want to test different frequencies, and you might want to also test your winning creative at different optimization events. So again, you can take your winning creative and use this as a consistent variable to test it against other variables that you might want to change. So today we learned the importance of creative testing, how to set up creative tests, and take action from the results. Some of the key takeaways from today are that 56% of the effectiveness of mobile campaigns on sales can be attributed to the quality of the creatives. So there is no doubt creative testing is very important. As we saw today, there are numerous possibilities when it comes to creative testing. So make sure that you isolate the creative element that you want to test and that all other elements are the same across cells. Once you find your winning creative, you can then test these other elements. When designing the test, make sure to start with defining the campaign objective, the primary KPI, a clear question, and a test hypothesis. On the basis of these to set up this creative test for success. Again, when analyzing the results, make sure you select the winning strategy on the basis of the primary KPI. But you can get lots of additional learnings and insights by deep diving into other KPIs or other metrics, and also into age, gender, or location breakdowns. And please don't forget, creative testing, just like other tests, requires an iterative approach. Ask, make, learn, adapt, and repeat. So I'd like to thank